Hello, I'm Anne-Louise from Minerva, and I'm here today to sew along with you this beautiful So La Di Da vintage Muse dress. A beautiful slim fitted dress with options for some extra pattern pieces if you're in a particularly frilly mood. However, we're opting for the frillless option as our fabric is just so gorgeous, I don't think it needs anything extra. The dress features princess seams, which are my favourite kind of seam, and a small poof in the sleeve head. For this pattern you will need your dress fabric. There's really so many options you can make this dress in. A lightweight summery linen to your heavier weight fabrics, possibly a denim would work really well. You will also need a lining fabric, a concealed invisible zipper 20 to 22 inches long and matching thread. We have chosen this particularly lovely polyester velvet by Lady McElroy. It's called Serpent Corsage and I'm in love. It combines two of my favourite things, soft shiny material and snakes. Try making a song out of that, Julie Andrews. I'm joking. Julie Andrews is awesome, and if anyone could, she could, but I digress. Of course, everything I talk about today will be available on Minerva and will be linked down below. When working with new fabric, we want to be aware of the washing instructions. While it is recommended you wash fabric before use, velvet is often different because of the lustrous pile that it is known for. However, Lady McElroy has let us know we can wash this fabric at 30 degrees, so that is what we're going to do. If in doubt about your fabric's washing instructions, take it to the dry cleaners. They know things and can normally be trusted with the fussiest of fabrics. It's always a good idea to take your time when working with a new pattern and fabric. This is especially true when working with velvet. But first things first, before I start cutting into this stunning fabric, I want to make sure the pattern is going to fit. So I check the size chart on the back, grab the nearest duvet cover and whip up a mock-up. This is an excellent way of deciding fit if you want to adjust length and troubleshooting, spotting areas where you might have to have extra patience to get through. Hence my unusually dressed mannequin friend. Her name is Lady Mary and she doesn't approve of her patchwork dress, but she's just going to have to live with it. As you can see, no neat and tidy finishes here. We just want to see how it fits and if we like the bare bones of the dress, which of course we do. Now we've had a fitting, we've washed our fabric, we have our scissors in hand ready to go, we need to talk about the nap. What is a nap? A nap is the texture of certain fabrics, most commonly velvet or corduroy, and describes which way the fibres lay. If you run your hand with the nap, it's smooth, and against the nap, it's more textured and fluffy. It's something you need to be thinking about all the time when working with velvet, as the nap needs to be going the same direction in all your pattern pieces. So it's a good idea to check your pattern layout and make sure all the pieces are the same way up. If they're not in the same direction, you may need to purchase extra fabric. With the nap in mind, I would like the fibres going down towards my hem. Here is our So La Di Da bodice pattern pieces. The pattern comes with a separate colour chart of the different sizes. I know from the mock-up I've done I want a size 10. I like to read over the instructions on each piece. There's nothing worse than thinking you've finished cutting out than finding you've missed a piece. In case I want to make it again in another size, I've clipped the pattern pieces to the size I want, then folded them under to keep them out the way. As we're lining our dress bodice, we want to cut all these pieces out in our lining as well. These are all my pretty bodice pieces. What I've tried to do instead of pattern matching is try to get a large piece of pattern in the centre of each piece, and I'm so happy with how the centre front has come out. As I've cut my skirt pieces, I've marked my darts on one side with pins. To transfer my marks over, I'm going to grab my chalk and mark both sides, pulling my pins out, and voila, marked darts. While I'm here, I'm going to pin them in place, double checking my marks line up on both sides. There is a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance used throughout this pattern, and we're going to be back stitching the beginning and end of our stitching lines to secure them. The first thing we are working on is attaching our front side pieces to our front panel to create our first princess seams by basting then sewing. Basting is a long, easy to remove stitch, which you can do by hand or by machine. They're handy to test if a garment fits, for example, on a garment with darts. Or they can make it easier to sew bulky items like zips or hemming jeans. And they're also excellent for how we are using them, to hold two slippery fabrics together. I'm basting a running back stitch within my seam allowance. However, because I stitched too close to my raw edges, my front panel still went for a walkabout under the side piece. However, I'm here to make mistakes so you don't have to. So after my first attempt failed, I added another row of basting stitches, which again worked to no avail. I finally cracked it. My running back stitch with what looks like an unnecessary amount of pins. Using whichever method works for you, secure then sew your side fronts to your front piece, then side back to your back pieces, then side to side pieces. Thankfully, unlike a lot of velvets, this one is quite forgiving, so could deal with some stitching and unpicking. When coming across a problem like this, try your best to work through it, because that's how we learn and become experienced and can share what we learn with others. So next time I sew velvet, I will know the best way to secure it. Do you have any velvet hacks? Let us know in the comments down below. Finally finishing off by turning the bodice right sides together and sewing across the shoulders. the curved seams have been clipped to allow them to lay nicely. We are then repeating all those steps in our lining pieces and pressing all our seams open. It's generally not recommended that you iron with velvet. However, when sewing, it's often necessary to get that crisp finish that stands out. So here's my top tips for ironing velvet. Always iron with right side facing down and place fabric on a special velvet mat, a soft towel or a scrap of your velvet. I have a rather nice piece of velvet left over, so I'm going to use that. With sewing, it's always right sides together, and that's how we are going to iron. And with ironing velvet, steam is your best friend. You can gently finger press seams, then apply lots and lots of steam to the wrong side of the fabric. Next, we're grabbing our sleeve pieces and doing 2 lines of gathering stitches between the 2 top notches and within our seam allowance. When doing small lines of gathers, I like to anchor one side with back stitches so I don't accidentally pull through my threads. Now we've sewn our sleeves right sides together, only our bodice section is lined, so it is best to finish the rest of our seams. Overlocking or a zigzag stitch is a really good option, but I am a huge fan of turned under seams. First we press open the seam allowance, then fold the allowance under to about 1/4 of an inch, so it's just touching the stitch line underneath. Pin it down and then sew along just the seam allowance. This seam finish isn't always practical for bulkier fabrics, but in this case it will help prevent fraying, protect us from velvet shrapnel, and add a haute couture feel to the garment, because we're fancy like that. Of course, this technique also works really well on stable fabrics that can hold creases, like cotton. As this seam finish is a little bulky, it's not suitable for curved seams like the ones we have on our bodice, but it's perfect for straight seams like our sleeve and skirt. I just want to take a quick break here at the halfway mark to talk about our wonderful community here at Minerva. We really want to encourage everyone to take up something crafty. At the top right of the post, you will be able to follow Minerva and keep up to date with offers, new releases, general fabric prettiness, and of course tutorials, sew-alongs, and our top pattern picks. Let us know what you would like to see next. Comment below. We love to hear what you think. Now at this point, you may be thinking, she already has her lining attached. Did I miss a step? Nope, I somehow forgot the dress had sleeves. If you're like me and forget to add crucial parts to the dress, tie or pin the lining out the way. With right sides together, we're going to match the underarm seam on the sleeve to the straight side seam of the bodice, making sure the back double notches and front single notches are on the same sides as the sleeve and the bodice, so we don't put our sleeve in back to front. Pinning the side seam in place, we're going to use that as our anchor, first pinning up the front of the sleeve and bodice and stopping when we hit our gathering stitches, and repeating the same step on the back. We want to stop pinning at the gathering stitches, as we're now going to pull on the stitches, creating our lovely sleeve poof and easing the fabric into the sleeve head until it fits snugly between our two pinned sections. You can secure the loose threads by looping them round a pin or by tying them off. Before we sew, we want to double check our gathers are even and straight, double stitching to start at the underarm and then working round the armhole. You can work inside the bodice or inside the sleeve for this seam. I prefer to work inside the bodice as it gives me a little more space and I can just pop the sleeve over the end of the sewing machine arm. Now we attach our lining. With right sides together, we're going to first match our shoulder seams, pinning out from each shoulder to the edge of the garment, then pin around the neckline. Once pinned, we're sewing all the way around the neckline, making sure our shoulder seams are open and flat on both sides. After we've finished sewing our neckline, we're going to clip all around this curved edge to make sure it sits wonderfully. By clipping as close as we can to the stitch without accidentally cutting it, we're cutting into our fabric every inch or so, relieving some of that tension along the seam allowance. Now for an extra neat finish, we're going to stitch the seam allowance to the lining. Before doing this, it's a good idea to press the seam allowance towards the lining. Wrong sides up is a little more fiddly, however I like to make sure every clipped part lays flat. With the edge of the foot alongside the inside neck seam, I'm going to straight stitch all along, lightly pulling the two apart to make sure I don't catch anything accidentally. This is what we have so far. An outside bodice with a cute poofy sleeves and a lining attached only at the neckline. Now is just a super easy skirt to attach and a zipper. Now we can get back to sewing our darts we marked many moons ago. Starting from the top of our waistband, we're sewing down to the end of the marked dart, angling the fabric so when we get to the mark we can run the machine off the edge of the fabric to prevent any weird bubbles. If you want to make double sure you're getting a straight dart, you can grab a ruler and chalk and connect the dots. We then tie off the end and repeat this with all 4 darts. We then join front and back skirt pieces together at the side seams, starting at the waist and sewing down to the hem, back stitching beginning and the end. Finish raw edges in whichever way brings you joy, because let's face it, we all have that one weird sewing technique that we're weirdly attached to. What's yours? Let us know in the comments. We then press darts towards the nearest side seam and press side seams open. We now join top and bottom. With right sides together, first match the side seams and then skirt darts to the corresponding curved seams. The dress will look so smart if we take that extra time to match up everything as closely as we can. It's not the sewing bee, we don't have to do this in 3 hours, and we're not being judged. This is what we have so far, a crisp looking garment. And now, no one panic, it's time for the concealed zip. First, we press the waist seam up, and now is an excellent time for fitting. Here is my lovely adjustable assistant Lady Mary all set up to my size. Turning the garment inside out, we pin the back seam together, making the dress as tight or as loose as we want. We mark those pins with chalk. If you're adjustable assistant less, it's time for some experimenting. Try at the waist first, secure with 1 pin, mark with chalk. Or use a non-adjustable human assistant to help with fitting. If in doubt, baste the zip in, try it on and move the zip accordingly. Anyway, no matter how we have marked our zip, we know we want to line the outside of our zip teeth up with our marks. Right sides together, making sure all marks are hit. I like to baste my zip in first, as I don't like fiddling with pins while concentrating on sewing neatly. Using our zipper foot, we're going to stitch down the garment as close to the teeth as possible, making sure my waist seam is pointing upwards. Repeat on the other side, making sure we line the waist seams up as closely as possible. But let's be honest, when was the last time we looked at someone's dress and said, "Oh my goodness, that's terrible, their waist seams are out by 7 millimeters. Then my favourite sewing hack. Turn the bodice and bodice lining right sides together, matching the raw edges. Everything now on the inside is actually the outside, so we want to catch the end of our zipper tape on this, which is the inside. Then, just short of the zip stitch, we're going to straight stitch, keeping as close as we can to that line of stitching, stopping about 1.5 centimeters from the end of your lining. Repeat on the other side, and you have an easy breezy attached lining. We're on the last leg. We're now doing our back seam. We're pinning as close as we can to the end of our zip stitching, making sure front and back pieces are even. We're going to back stitch at the top. Our stitch is going to jump to the left a little, but we're not going to worry about that. We're then trimming the excess fabric to roughly the seam allowance length and finishing the back seam in our favourite way. Time to get your fingers all warmed up, ready for some slip stitching. Fold the lining fabric under by about 1.5 centimeters and match all seams to the bodice and lining. This will make sure that the lining doesn't pull the bodice out of shape. Then slip stitch your lining into the seam allowance of the waist seam. Repeat step around the armholes. However, as they're on a definite curve, a smaller seam allowance on the armhole lining is a good idea. And then hem, skirt and sleeves to finish. After hemming and a quick final press, we are done. Good job everyone. The fabric moves beautifully. It's tight enough to show my figure, but loose enough so I still feel confident and comfortable. It's really an all-season dress. We can wrap it up for the cold with tights, chunky boots and a leather jacket, or dress it down for the summer with strappy heels and a wrap. at Minerva, we love to hear your views. What would you like to make with Lady McElroy velvet? What fabric would you use for So La Di Da vintage Muse dress? Any questions, comment below and we'd be happy to answer them. And don't forget, Minerva Craft Club members get a 10% discount for 12 months when they sign up. And creating a free account, you'll get a welcome present of a discount coupon. Join us with our lovely community of makers, follow, comment and like, and we'll see you next time.